Hi, as Liam said, I'm from the Heritage Council. We're based in Kilkenny, and just to let you know, heritage is built, natural and cultural. So I'm going to talk to you about the Heritage Map Viewer that originally started as a coastal map viewer, which some of you might have seen at the last Compass 2010, I think it was. And we have evolved a bit, luckily, and in fact Andy's shown you some of the tools and things that have been evolving out of this. I'm just going to run over the project background a little bit. It was driven by the heritage sector, and it started with 8 local authorities and ourselves, and we funded it through the system of funding that we have for local authority heritage plans. And then we got very valuable advice from colleagues in many different departments and agencies who are sitting here, and really without their support and common sense, you know, it would have been very hard to advance on this. Obviously Compass did the actual sort of hard work on the technical side, and then we've really tested it in different case studies, and in fact Billy worked on some of those last year. Policy context, this is very familiar to anyone who works sort of in the environmental area. This is where, you know, the local authorities were sort of grappling with. The heritage officers in particular wanted to be able to assist their colleagues, you know, by showing them data visually to try and work within these various sort of different policies. This is just to show you how we started. The local authorities mentioned on the map are the ones we started on the coast, and then now we've got 23 in total, and the inland people have taken it up. They were so excited by what they saw for the coast, they decided, yes, we need it as well. Just to say, we're doing this on a voluntary basis. Local authorities join because they want to, not because we're forcing them. I mean, we've just find life is too short to sort of try and sort of, you know, cattle prod people into things that they don't want to do. And the local authorities, I think, are inundated with people asking them for data, new this, that, and new that. You know, so there's no point in adding to people's sort of already overloaded lives. This is the methodology. We are using, obviously, digital data. We haven't dared go near the paper stuff yet. That's a sort of horror in the background we're going to have to come to. Liam's crew that have been tackling a lot of that on the sort of the species side. Obviously, we want to use web services as far as is possible, so please, more web services. We want to see that. Inspire compliant, Irish Spatial Data Exchange, you know, compatible, you know, thanks to Compass and their sort of relations with other organizations, we're well confident on that. When I say multidisciplinary approach, I mean multidisciplinary from the heritage side, but also I think from the sort of technical side too. We also went out on the ground, because obviously what you have on your map is not necessarily what's there in reality, and we found, particularly for the heritage data, you know, things perhaps weren't quite as they seemed on the map, or different versions of the same, supposedly the same data set, weren't quite the same. So it was interesting to look at that. These case studies, which I'm going to talk about further, these were really the sort of acid test. It was last year, and we decided, okay, if this tool doesn't help us in various sort of standard situations that a lot of the local authorities and the Heritage Council finds themselves in, there is no point in continuing. You know, there's not enough money, and we don't have enough time. And we passed our own acid test. Admittedly, we didn't. We did get sort of external, in sense of other colleagues to try it out. It wasn't just us saying our toy is wonderful. And so this year, we've been tackling the whole thing of trying to build up sort of composite heritage data coverages, bringing in more data, more dots and more lines. So we haven't quite got to the analytical stage yet, but we're dying to get there. And again, it slightly depends on money. So the themes. We have sort of 6 or 7 basic themes. The heritage one is obviously the one that is our sort of unique selling point. It comes from local authority data as well as nationally gathered data. The other data sort of folders have been kindly supplied by yourselves, and I'm very grateful for the cooperation and support we've received from many other departments and agencies. You know, really, it is the contextual data within which the heritage data sits that makes this useful. I mean, it's all very well, you know, when you can see your own little bit on my map, you need to be able to see what other people are doing. You also need to be able to see offshore as well. This is what it looks like. It probably looks pretty familiar, you know, because it is on the framework that Andy showed us, and it's a very, very usable one, which is great. I mean, a lot of the people in the local authorities and the heritage officers, like myself, would be, you know, this is a fairly alien area, and it's very instinctive, and we're very grateful for that. Thank you. This is just to show you some of the fancy things you can do with all the different data. Thanks to Jim Casey, we've got some of the erosion data and the soil susceptibility, so we can do that along with our archaeological sites and go, wow, look what's going to be washed away next time we have either a storm surge or as the sea rises over the next 100 years. And then we can also admire it on the historical mapping as well, and look at interesting things like, sort of samphire records on Dramana, which, brings the cultural and the natural data together, which gives you a much rounder idea of what went on there as well. Samphire was a really important export in the 18th century from North County Dublin. A lot of issues. I'm sure these are very familiar to a lot of you. There isn't that many common data sets at a county level, and yet the county level is a very interesting perspective. It's a very interesting scale at which to look at things from a heritage point of view. Metadata, more fibre in our diet. The thing about this, we have such a weird range of data sets. You have to get across to the user. There's nobody who's going to understand each data set and its particular quirk. So we need metadata that people can get fairly quickly. You can understand, oh, okay, well, I better be careful with this one, or wow, this is really strong. So somehow we're using geo-networks and the portal that Compass set up, but we've got to find a way as heritage practitioners to communicate clearly to non-heritage people, as well as even just to colleagues in different sectors, or even colleagues in the same sector. Things like priorities. Suddenly when you have all these aspects of heritage, all these dots and colours and things on the map, actually, are they all of the same value? They may be in law, but in reality, pragmatic decisions have to be made, and we're going to have to face up, take hard decisions. And it's good. This sort of visualization forces you to look at something and go, okay, we need to do something about it. And then heritage data, it's very nice to go out and collect data. It's great fun, particularly if it's things like sort of boats or things like habitats, and place names. But what do you actually need in order to take a better decision, in order to manage heritage alongside new infrastructural needs like the new sort of electricity grids we need? What do we actually need? What do we need to prioritize? So there's a lot of hard questions that have just come up from doing this. This is just one data quirk. Thank you, Liam, for the map. Just to show you one of the sort of pitfalls you can fall into. This is a map of the corncrake, which is one of the most endangered birds, I think. And here you have a fantastic map. My God, look at it. It's all over the country. Isn't that wonderful? This is if you haven't realized that, A, it is endangered, so this map, there must be something wrong, or the number of records that there are, there's 1,000 records, and that they stretch right back. I'm sorry, I had left off the bottom there, but you'd find out that actually that is a time series over about 150 years. If you put the time filter on, you have one little dot in sort of Donegal. That's the type of pitfall people can end up with. The corncrake is relatively well known, but probably not that well known. So we need to get that sort of thing across. Our testing phase, these were the different case studies that, when I say we, it was Compass and Billy Hines, and going out, and also with the heritage officers, with the different local authorities, who all had a slightly different take and a different interest, which is why they chose the different case studies, to work out, would this viewer actually help? And we're just talking about simple visualization. And so some of it is in relation to sort of statutory stuff, around appropriate assessment under the Habitats Directive. Other things are like tourism products. There's a lot of emphasis, particularly in sort of Galway and in Waterford, in developing new coastal tourism. And then things like integrated coastal zone management, Fingal are sort of dipping their toes into that as well. And sort of wind and renewable energies was the new things coming up. And then an offshore project with Birdwatch. And we got very good feedback, I was glad to say. What was interesting were very sort of practical things, like having a viewer with no need for GIS skills and no license fee is now extremely important to a lot of people, particularly in local authorities where people have lost, maybe the GIS sort of knowledge or personnel that were in there, and they don't have the money for licenses. So this gives simple data, access just to sort of checking something quickly that, is found to be very useful. Seeing data from other sectors, relatively easily is very important, particularly looking across an administrative boundary. It seems quite a small thing, but it is an enormous step just to be able to see outside your county. Some local authorities do have a lot of cross-county boundary data, others have none. Looking into the sea as well, that great, sort of unknown. You know, it isn't just flat blue or flat and white, as my plan was for a long time. Maybe it still is, I haven't looked. But, you know, the sea is very important, and there's a lot out there. There's a lot of data about it as well, too, and you can look at it relatively easily on this. They found that usage for this in strategic environmental assessment and appropriate assessment and everything was wonderful. Mainly this thing of being a one-stop shop for data sets, a sort of publishing mechanism is very useful. Again, it does bring up the issue of you have to be sure that your data sets are actually, can you trust them? Because obviously people are going to trust them, even if you have a fancy disclaimer saying, you know, we have no legal liabilities for any of this. You know, when it comes to it, people are using it to take a decision. And there was also feedback they wanted better reporting tools, quite understandably. We've been working on that, and improved heritage metadata. So we're going off and trying to do our homework this year too. This is slightly more in-depth thing on the actual strengths, repeating the stuff on access, enhancing the scoping process. The production of maps for enhanced public participation. This was a very interesting thing that came back in particular from Wicklow, I think, where the planners pointed out that being able to show to other people, sort of third parties, the general public, why you have zoned an area in a particular way because of this reason sort of shown on a map, it improves the trust in decision making, that it isn't just, you know, sort of brown envelopes and that sort of thing. It is actually based on information, and it, you know, and that I think is something we need to keep in mind. That's a very important, simple but important thing. And also it explores competing interests, and I can identify conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest, particularly on the coast, and sort of cross-boundary impacts. And landscape. Now I'll come to the landscape stuff later. We've been developing, Michael Cushion has been doing a lot of work on trying to compile the landscape data that we have. But, you know, this is going to become more and more important until we have the National Landscape Strategy, particularly in relation to renewable energy and the various infrastructures that will have. So that was all very positive. There were weaknesses, of course. Whole issue around data maintenance and update. Now, obviously, web services, you go, don't worry, everyone will have web services. There's no need to worry about updating. But, you know, I mean, that's nice in theory, but when the practice will happen is another matter. The detail of data set. We have so many data sets, and I think it was brought up, was it by Tom? You know, you can have too many data sets, and that's something we have been working on. And on weeding data sets, you know, what's actually useful? If it has no attributes, do you really want it in there? Like, no. And it's amazing how people find it hard to believe that their data set has no attributes. When you actually show it to them on this and say, look, when I push the identify tool and there's a blank, you know, how useful do you think that is? And, you know, in that way, using viewers like this are very useful in actually just sort of assessing how useful it is. Better reporting functions and more counties. So we've got more counties, a lot more counties, and hopefully more to come, and the reporting functions are happening as well. So this year we've been concentrating on reporting tools, and also the print map is a big advance for us, magnifier and various things, and also compiling local authority data sets. This is the record of protected structures, which, you know, has a number of counties on it. Usually this is generated at local authority level. And even within local authorities, sometimes they have difficulty. You know, a lot of people still only have paper records, or their sort of database isn't entirely complete, or they're revising it and all of this. So slowly we're building up a mosaic, and hopefully we will have, at some stage, a complete map of the record of protected structures. This is a first, you know, actually pulling data sets together is quite a novel thing in heritage, apart from biodiversity, of course. They've been way ahead of us. Landscape characterization, something the HeritageCouncil has been working on for quite a while, despite the fact that there isn't really a sort of common system for doing it. There's best practice, and then there's other things. We've been pulling together, Michael has been working on this, the different landscape character assessment categories. So as a result, we have this sort of nice map with different colors, and then an extraordinary list of sort of what the actual layers are. Obviously, we have to grapple with this. This is an early stage. We'll have to take a lot of decisions ourselves on how to actually compile the categories, and hopefully there'll be a national landscape strategy that will help us do that. And that, you know, there's a lot of work to do, but you can see that there's a lot of work to do by looking at this. This is scenic routes and views, so there you are, Beverly. We're working on that. We might be able to share it with you. A nice thing to show that actually this isn't a composite data set, sorry, that actually there is a correlation between where people put their aquaculture and how big the waves are, which, you know, obviously is logical, but it's nice to see it's reflected on this. And then we are pulling in my plan zoning for the generalised zoning for local authorities, but we're also retaining individual local authority sets. These are our aims for the future, templates for heritage data, eventually digitisation of paper stuff, public version at the end of the year, we hope. That's one of the things we want to do. Metadata standards, etc., etc. And then we have to remember though, and it's so easy to fall into, there's still the reality, you know, the map will never, our computers will never completely replace the real world. So let's remember that we do have to go out there as well. Thank you very much.